Hello, this is Train for Print. My name is Marcus Cruz. Welcome to the first part of my treasure chest tutorial series, where we in Blender model a treasure chest for 3D printing. Right, let's get started. As you see here, I have Blender opened. I will start with a new file, and if you don't know which of these you're going to use, pick General. We see here the famous default cube, and we're actually going to use that. So you see here that I orbit my viewport around the cube. This area here is where the screencast keys are displayed. And that is an add-on I've installed into Blender. And using that, you will see exactly what I press when I do things inside Blender. So to orbit around something, you hold down the middle key. Often that is the mouse wheel on your mouse. You can also press Numpad plus and minus to zoom in and out. You can scroll in and out. You can hold Shift and drag the middle mouse button to pan around. And when you pan away, you see that we orbit around another point. To focus the viewport on a specific object, make sure you select it with the left mouse button. See this orange outline, and press Numpad delete or point dot. And then we will focus on that object and yet again orbit around it with the middle mouse button. All this is also available in this part of the screen. So this circle here displays the axis X, Y, Z, and clicking and dragging inside this circle here lets us orbit around the object in the same way. We can use this magnifying glass to zoom in and out. We can pan. We can also switch to the camera view. And we can finally toggle between orthographic and perspective view. This is orthographic, and this is perspective. Normally you want to view a scene in perspective to get a better feel for what it is you're actually looking at. We are going to start using this very cube, but first let's inspect it a little bit closer. And I press the N key. That toggles this area here. You see we have a number of tabs here, and one of them should be called item. I have made some very slight changes to this. Blender's GUI can be customized very much, but I've made some very slight changes. I have screencast keys, I had the 3D print menu, and I had quad remesh. So when I see up here in the item, I can see where it actually is. There is a little orange dot in the center. That is called the origin of the object. and we see that its location is 0, 0, 0. It's currently not rotated and it's not scaled, and its dimensions are 2 by 2 by 2 meters, so it's quite big. A normal human would fit inside this cube standing up. But when we export this model for 3D printing, each meter will be 1 unit in the STL file that we most often choose to export as, and that unit, when imported into the slicer to prepare your file for 3D printing, is interpreted as 1 millimeter. So when we export this for printing, it becomes very tiny, so we must scale it up. Treasure chest in fantasy setting is about 12 by 14 millimeters or something. So we should make this 12 by 14 or so. And I can then introduce our first tool, that is the scale. So I press S for scale, and I can just drag out until I have it as big as I want it. 12. Yeah, that's good. I zoom out, and now we see that the camera looks tiny compared to the chest, and the light that is part of the default scene is somewhere inside. We can just see the top protruding slightly. Right, so we will fix that. One other thing we can do with the scale tool is to restrict it along an axis. So I want this to be slightly longer on the x-axis, and the x-axis is this red line going here. So I press S again. I can drag the mouse up and down, but now I press X. So SX, and then we scale it along the x-axis only. I can also press one of the other axes, Y or Z, but now I want to scale it along the x-axis, and I just want to make it around 14. Actually, let's make it 16 or so. And all these chests have a rounded top. Or if it's a proper pirate chest, of course it has a round top. How do we do that? We can't scale the top only right now. So up here we have a drop down that says object mode. Object mode is this, where we manipulate objects. We can scale them, we can rotate them, and we can move them, and we can delete them. Just press delete or Ctrl+Z to undo that. But to actually edit an object, we must be in edit mode. So I just press this drop down, edit mode. And now we can see that I can select different parts of the object. These lines here are called edges. So I can use the same tool, scale, as I did in object mode, but now I only do it for a small part. And up here we can see that in edit mode we have 3 sub modes, or selection mode it's called. And we have vertex, then we select the vertices. These dots are called vertices, and each vertex connects to other vertices with edges. So one edge is between 2 vertices, and then we have faces finally. And faces is what builds up the surface of the object. Without faces we have nothing. And faces, each face is 3 or more edges that goes around in a loop, and that's what's called a polygon. If it only would have 3 edges and 3 vertices, it will be a triangle. This here, it's called a quad. Also, because it's a polygon with 4 edges and 4 vertices. And quads are quite good to have in your mesh when you're modeling. Right, that was a little bit of theory, so let's move forward with some actual editing. You see that I, without thinking, I use the keyboard shortcuts. I will try to explain what I'm doing. If there is something you miss, look down here at the screencast keys. So 1 for vertices, 2 for edges, and 3 for faces. Now I want to be in edge mode. So I select this by left clicking on it or near it. You see it has a bit of margin. And then I hold down Shift and click another. And then they are both selected. Now we have these two. We will use a tool called Bevel. So Ctrl+B is for bevel. I can also use the bevel tool. I prefer to use the keyboard shortcut, and that is Ctrl+B. This doesn't look very round, so before I left click to confirm this bevel, I scroll my mouse up. Now you see it's rounded, and then I left click to confirm my selection. It's actually starting to look like something. And if you're not sure how many of these you need, you can go out to object mode again and look at the object. It doesn't look very smooth, does it? We can see that the edge is clearly built up of straight lines. So let's undo that. Do it again, but scroll up some more. We can still see the lines, but if we inspect the edge here, it's very hard. It's possible, but it's quite hard to see that it's built up of straight lines. It looks quite round. Let's see if we can get a good. No, it's still possible, but I would say it's quite good. Of course, how detailed you want to do this very much depends on what kind of printer you're going to use to print this. If you're going to use a resin printer, then much higher level of detail, so it's a much higher risk that these these edges are visible in the print. On an FDM printer, much less risk. Also, it will be built up of layers, and since we know that this is only 12 millimeters across, about half an inch, this is very much good enough for what we want. So I tab into edit mode. If I am in object mode, I can press tab and then I go into edit mode for the selected object. Exactly the same as doing this in the tab menu. So I tab out and tab in, so I toggle between these modes. That's actually pretty good, I think. We will use one more tool. I want to have a line here separating the chest from the lid. So we're going to move this up. So I switch to face selection mode, keyboard shortcut 3, and I will move that up. And the keyboard shortcut for moving something, think of it as you grab it and want to move it, is G. And I move it up, but I want to move it straight up, so I press G and Z. And I move it about here. Now we have only the lid. And we can then use the extrude tool. So I cancel with right click, but if I press E, I can just drag down and get however big I want this. I want a very high chest or a very low chest. I want something in the middle. But actually I want to have a small line here. So let's undo that. I extrude it just a little bit and then a little bit again, and then I extrude it down. Now I switch to edge selection mode, GX to move that in slightly. Now we have that edge, but we want it all the way around. GX. The longer of these must be moved along the Y axis. So it's not perfect, but it's definitely recognizable as a treasure chest. I've tabbed out of edit mode. Let's actually export this STL file. First select it, and then File, Export, STL, and type the file name .stl. Check this checkbox, selection only. There we have it. that was all for today's lesson. So see you next week. Bye.